Okay, folks, welcome to my fifth Yaira #1 review video called Worthless Answers to My Whys. Now, I was actually not expecting to make this video. This video is a sequel of sorts to my previous video, Yaira #1 Too Many Whys, in which I read a section of Yaira #1 and came away with 30 different questions that I really couldn't explain from the book. 30 different questions that distracted me from the story. And so I got pushback on this on YouTube from a user whose name I'm going to pronounce as NukeTip. And NukeTip actually provided various answers to my why questions. And I looked at all of these questions and I thought, well, I could respond in text or I could respond in video and that way give everybody else the benefit of the answers. And so I've made this video. Let's go ahead and get into the questions that I asked that NukeTip responded to. Didn't respond to like all 30 of the questions, but that's okay. About I think maybe 15 or 20 out of the 30. But I want to show why the answers NukeTip gave are insufficient. So let's get into the first situation. We have the scene where Stefania Martinez is introduced. She's in a gang of 4. Her name is not given. And you see these thugs gearing up for something. They've got shotguns, they've got ammo and guns and whatnot. And Stefania's there with 3 other people, and we don't know anything else about them other than they're commenting about the news broadcast. So I'm looking at these people and thinking, okay, you've given me no reason to care about them. Why am I being introduced to these characters? Now, NukeTip responds, because they'll be important later. Okay. What you're actually confessing is that they're not important now. And that's a problem, because you've just introduced 4 unimportant characters. Why should I care about any of these characters? The thing is, you can make them important very, very quickly. Or at least you can single some of them out to make important. For example, have a character mention the most important character, who is in this case Stefania, by name to make her stand out. That will allow the reader to say, okay, out of this group of characters that you've just connected me with, and to whom I feel no connection whatsoever, I at least have the new connection now of this character's name, so I know that this character is the one that's important, and I should wonder what's going to happen with her. And then all of a sudden you've got this connection, a little bit of bond, not much, but a little more than you had before, of bond between the reader and the character. And that's what you want to do, is you want to create situations in which your readers bond with these characters so that you care what happens to them. And there's just little ways of doing that. They could have done more than that. They could do kind of a little talk about what it is they plan on doing and why it is they plan on doing it. That would also help a great deal towards connecting us with all of the characters in the scene. But, this is the minimum that you could do. Why are these characters gearing up with guns? That's another question that I asked, and NukeTip responds, to commit a crime. Oh, thank you, NukeTip. That's so helpful. What kind of crime? There's all kinds of crimes. There's terrorism, there's robbery, there's gangbanging. You can have assassinations, you can have all sorts of crimes. Which crime are they planning to commit? Because that will give us information about them. That's why I say, have one of the characters briefly mention their plans. And that way we can kind of understand who these characters are in the grand scheme of things. And maybe if we also know why they're planning on doing what they're doing, it'll give us a little more sympathy for them as well. And that'll just strengthen the bond with them. The point is to make the characters and the readers have a bond that the reader pays attention to. You can't do that without sharing information. Now we have the characters later on holding up a truck. Why are they holding up a truck? We have no idea from the dialogue or from the art, because the BA doesn't tell us anything from the side of the truck. Why are they holding up this truck? And NukeTip says, to rob it. But where do we know that from? On this panel, there is no indication. You can't see that it's a bank truck because there is a pole or something in the way of the word bank. Don't let bank on the truck side be obscured. That's the easy solution right there. Why can't they just look at this and realize the reader's not going to have enough information from the word go. Now, why can't we tell how many robbers there are? And Nuketip says, well, we saw in the setup panel there are 4. But by the time that Nuketip gave me this answer, well, I already demonstrated that there aren't 4. There are at least 7. That's why I'm asking the question. If you count all of the crooks by their hairstyles and clothing, there are at least 7 distinct crooks. So how many people are actually in this gang and are there at this particular time? That would be helpful to know. Why? Because if we don't know how many there are, we can't gauge how dire their situation becomes after 1 or more of them are lost. If you've got 4 people with you, then losing one of them is a serious problem. If you've got 8 people with you, well, you could probably do without the 8th one. So it matters how many people there are, especially when we don't know how many guards there are as well. So you could have one of the characters mention the group size, 1 guard against 7 of us. It doesn't seem fair. And that way we know that there's 7 of them. Now, Stefania sees one of her friends get shot, and then she looks, and then she looks again. And the second time she says, shit, shit, shit. Why is she looking? Why are we seeing her twice in this panel? Why is it that we're seeing her the first time just looking kind of, I don't know, consternated, and then the next time she's looking a bit scared and saying expletives, and I'm just like, you wasted a panel up there. That panel immediately above is useless because all it does is just show her with another facial expression. Barely, because you can hardly see her through the mask. So my question is, instead of a useless panel focusing on the girl, why don't we get a view of whoever shot the guy? That would be helpful. That would actually give us information. And Nuketip responds, the creators thought the shock of the sudden death was worth showing. Yeah, but they do show the shock of the sudden death in the next panel. It's like, you showed 2 versions of her faces. One of them had that shock on her face. You can see it. It's right there. You don't get anything more from having the first and the second panel together than having just the second panel alone. It's the same amount of information being communicated. Moreover, why bother to punctuate the cursing when it's clear that Stefania is saying shit, shit, shit? And Nuketip says, well, why punctuate any curse word ever? It's common practice. Yeah, it's common practice to punctuate the word so that you don't know what it is. You can clearly tell what it is here. If you want to actually punctuate a word like this, you have to cover it up so much that it obscures the word entirely. And here's the thing. They know this. They know this because they did it twice already. That first panel that introduced them had that. So there's no excuse. Now my next question is, why isn't she cursing excitedly? She says, shit, 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 instead of shit, shit, shit. And Nuketip responds, she's in shock. Sorry she isn't melodramatic enough for you. I'm not looking for melodrama here. What I'm looking for is the correct interpretation of whatever it is that she's feeling, because punctuation can modify the meaning of an expletive. If I say shit, and then I say shit, those could be 2 different meanings. Same word, but because you could hear the exclamation point at the end of the other, it's a different meaning entirely. So an exclamation point implies shock. It implies surprise. But a period, that's just basically disappointment. That's like coming to grips with a situation. That's like a feeling of resignation, to realize like you failed. So for her to say, shit, 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 to me, that looks like her realizing that they're going to have trouble. But it doesn't sound like surprise or excitement. It doesn't sound like shock. Now we move on to the next scene in which they finally reveal the person who shot the guy. And then Stefania shoots him. Except he's wearing a vest. It seems clear to me that he's wearing a vest. So, and I don't see any blood flying. So I'm thinking that Yeah, he'll be okay. I mean, he might be stunned, but okay. And then his wild shot kills somebody else. And then when we come back, he's still shooting at Stefania. But wait a minute. Um, there are now two guys by the truck. Where did we get three guys from? How did we get two guys by the truck? That that I mean, when we started off, we had just one guy on his knees, and then Stefania realized, don't these guys usually work in pairs? Which means he was the only guy in the scene, and now we've got three in the scene. So how is it now we have two guys by the truck instead of one guy? And Nuke Tip says, well, the surprise guard was from inside the building. Yes, I'm aware that we had a surprise guard come out from inside the building. But here's the thing, what I wasn't aware of and what Nuke Tip isn't aware of is that there were actually two surprise guards from inside the building. But due to coloring, it isn't immediately clear that the third guard differed from the second. See, what happened was in the last panel here, we see the third guard colored all in blue. He's got all this blue tinge to him. So we can't tell immediately that he is not the guard from the first panel. The guard from the first panel is the one lying on the ground to the left, holding his gun pointed in the air. That's not immediately obvious, especially when we have been trained by the first few panels to think, okay, there are two guards on the scene now. And so when we see, looking left to right, this guard, and we don't know because of his coloring that he's not the guard from the first panel here, we're thinking those two guards are the same. And this guard's even in the same stance as this panel. So this guard gets shot, he recovers himself, and then he shoots again. That's the normal thing that we would think. Until we go a little bit further to the right and we see, oh wait, there's a guard lying on the ground. Maybe that's this guy. This scene could have been choreographed a lot better, and the main point is that more care should have been taken to communicate that a third guard had arrived. Now we come to this little interlude scene where we're told trouble is brewing for Mick Davies and the local Florist Park police. Okay, I'm such a stickler for the fact that you really need to name your characters, but you also need to tell us about their relationship to the other characters. So why aren't we told what position Mick Davies holds in the police department? Now Nuke Tip says, well, why aren't we told all the cops' ranks? Well, genius, here's the thing. The only reason, well, one of the reasons, there's two reasons, that this scene exists is to reintroduce this character from ISOM number 1 and give him a name. Because we saw this character all the way back, but we never found out what this character's rank was. We never found out what this character's name was. So here they're at least giving us a name, but if you're going to reintroduce him, why would you introduce him only by name and not also by rank? This isn't supposed to be a mystery. We're not supposed to have, it shouldn't be a mystery that Mick Davies is either a lieutenant, a captain, a commissioner. What the heck is he? How does this police thing work in Florist Park? What kind of ranks do they even hold in the Florist Park Police Department? Tell us, because this is not something that we're not supposed to know. Stop trying to make a mystery out of everything. And not only that, but the fact that Mick Davies is mentioned by name suggests he's an important person. Now, it turns out he's not. He never appears in the book again. But he's going to appear at some point in the future. I mean, the fact that you even bothered to name him tells me that he will make a return appearance. So why don't you tell us a little about him? Now we have Yaira being confronted by Yantony and Yanessa and Magus Nuamite, and after this initial surprise of the confrontation, Yaira looks up and she's kind of surprised. She seems kind of surprised, and then she looks down. And I'm like, why is she looking down? She looks away and down, and I'm like, is that shame I'm seeing on her face? Is she kind of like a child who's been caught by her mother? Because for all we know, that is Yaira's mother up there. Why is she looking downward and away from them? And then I realized there's probably two interpretations. One is shame, and the other is she's trying to, keep track of Stefania, who she was just fighting with. So that becomes my question. Why does Yaira look away from her pursuers? Is it shame, perhaps, or is she trying to keep an eye on Stefania? We just don't know from that panel. So Newtip says, "Consider the silver-haired lady's dialogue. It isn't shame." Yeah, the only dialogue we've gotten up to this point from Yanessa is, "Game over, Yaira. You thought you could hide from us." Which is said in such a way and from such an unknown person that we don't know if that is something that would evoke shame in Yaira. I mean, it could be like the scolding of a parent. It could be the entreaty of an old friend. It could be anything. We don't know how these women relate, so how are we supposed to know it's not shame? Now we see Yaira being thrown into a car, except that car is already in the air when she hits it. Why does it look like the car is hopping into the air to meet Yaira? I mean, what happened here? Now, Nuketip actually says, or did the impact knock the car into the air? Look, physics doesn't work that way. Traveling in the direction she was traveling, Yaira should have at best hit the roof of the car, look where she is in the air, and realize the car, since it's not tipped over in any significant amount, she would not have impact. The car would have been on the ground, and there's no way her back or her butt even would have impacted with the side of the car. At best, she would have impacted with the roof of the car. So Yaira's impact might have rolled the car over, but it wouldn't have lifted the car nearly straight up in the air. I mean, that just couldn't have happened that way. So now we have a scene with Magus Nuamite chasing Stefania, well, actually teleporting in behind Stefania, and instead of attacking her right away, he lets her get all the way down to a car that she's going to get inside and steal, and then attack her. Why does Magus Nuamite wait? Why does he wait until she's in a car to attack her? And then Nuketip says, because in the car she can get away faster. And at this point, Nuketip is just not paying attention. Nuketip is being argumentative for the sake of being argumentative. Next, we have a scene in which we have the sound effect kick. Why in the world does the artist think kick is an acceptable sound effect? Well, Nuketip says, well, I'm just glad sound effects have returned to comics. Okay, fair enough, but we don't need bad sound effects. It's better for the scene to be silent than to have a bad sound effect in there. And it's not like numerous examples of good sound effects don't exist. I mean, pick up some comics, find out what they do. Now we have the Alpha Core interlude, where we have a number of people mentioned, and it's not clear how many is actually being spoken of. Ingrid Valdez says, that's Yaira, but who's with her? There's 3 with her energy signature output detected here, and 1 other unknown. And Solari says, no, there were 4, the other got away. Now, my question was, why can't Solari be specific about what he means by there were 4? Because I offered up my own explanation for what he meant. Now, Nuketip has an explanation that does not make any sense at all. 4 equals the 3 attacking Yaira plus Stefania. No, sorry, that does not make any sense. Because you've left out the 1 other unknown. Ingrid Valdez said there are 3 signatures and 1 other unknown, and then Brian Solari says there were 4. Yaira's signature isn't unknown, and it is the same as Stefania's. We know this from the scene with McDavies, where one of the officers says, it isn't Yaira, sir, talking about Stefania. It's someone with the same power signature, which means that Yaira and Stefania have the same power signature. Now, if you look at the 4 having the same power signature, as including Yaira and Stefania, what you've got is 4 minus Yaira and Stefania equals 2 left with Yaira's power signature. And that means out of Yanessa, Yantony, and Magus Nuamite, 2 of those 3 have Yaira's power signature. Well, Yanessa and Yantony are the obvious choices. And so the 4 that have Yaira's power signature are Yaira, Yanessa, Yantony, and Stefania, and the 1 other unknown is Magus Nuamite. That's the one that has, the unknown power signature. Now, here's the part where the character depictions get really inconsistent because Ingrid Valdez says their power levels are unprecedented. Do we engage? And Solari says, no, not with them. I have a feeling that if we get the one that escaped, we won't have to chase after Yaira. She'll come right to us. Okay, if you've seen Alpha Core #1, you would know that Solari is kind of a dork. He just charges in blindly into situations that he doesn't fully understand. So how is it that in Alpha Core #1 he's this dope, and then he's a tactician in Yaira #1? We get him to be a strategist in Yaira #1 and a bullheaded dope in Alpha Core #1. And this is where Nuketip just has cognitive dissonance out the wazoo, because Nuketip actually throws out multiple answers. Different writers, still settling on character interpretation, bad reading comprehension. I mean, we've actually gotten to the point of just flat out blaming the reader now. Well, different writers is no excuse, because we expect professional writers to understand the characters they've been given well enough to ensure their interpretations of the character don't stray too far from the core template. You're not going to have Reed Richards talking in hip hop language. You're not going to have, Spider-Man basically being a cruel and savage person. The core template of the character should be understandable enough that different writers can pick up on who this character is. And if there's no settled character interpretation, it's not even time for the book to come out, because you need the writer to be able to know the characters. If the writer doesn't know the character, the writer shouldn't write the character, and the book should be handed off to someone else. More importantly, if the company as a whole doesn't have a grasp on who this character is, then it's still time to workshop that character before putting it on the page. Bad reading comprehension. Well, guess what? Rippaverse's writer's inability to give a character a consistent personality and voice across multiple titles is not a reader problem. This is a problem between the Soska sisters and Chuck Dixon and Eric July for being editor-in-chief of the Rippaverse and not giving a crap about how his characters are portrayed across titles. So now we have Yaira being grabbed by a construct of Magus Newamite. Note the special effect grab. Good lord. And yet Magus Newamite taunts her, saying, "To think you could have seen home one last time." And Yaira says, "This is my home!" Which is not what she would say if she were actually in that position. She would either distinguish and say, "This is my home," meaning Earth, as opposed to my home world is my home. Or she would say, "This is my home," which again distinguishes her home world from that. But you wouldn't put the emphasis on the word home. And so I ask, why does Yaira put the emphasis on home rather than this or is? And at this point, Nuketip is just being a jerk and saying, "Well, because she does." Look, the Soska sisters ain't going to sleep with you, all right? They don't know you. They're not going to give you credit. They're not going to thank you for defending them. You're not going to get a signed picture of them. You're not going to get their bathwater in the mail. All right? If you like the Soska sisters, what you need to do is hold them accountable instead of sweeping their errors under the rug. The whole point of these review videos is so that the Rippaverse can get better, so that somebody can look at this and say, you know what? If I ever have to work for the Rippaverse, if I ever put out a comic book of my own, maybe one of the writers in the Rippaverse themselves will see this and say, I need to up my game, because there are so many flaws in the work that is being put out by this company that it's an embarrassment. And I want to be proud of the work that I put out. I don't want to put out an embarrassment. And the only way that's going to happen is if you get off the tit of these writers, and start showing them, look, you did this wrong. You did that wrong. You need to do better. Without that feedback, they're not going to improve. When have you ever seen Eric July And the Soska sisters and anybody else say, we really need to improve. The only time that we've seen that so far is with, Kane and White supposedly schooling Deborah Carrington on how to do these scenes better. Whereas Ethan Van Sciver has pointed out that it's more likely those scenes were just redrawn by better artists. But in any case, the writing needs to come under the same focus. And if it doesn't, then the Rippaverse is not going to succeed. Finally, we come to the lighter scene. And I gotta tell you, this one gets me every time. You've got this lighter coming out of nowhere. Why does she have one? She throws it into an oil field, so she needs it obviously to set this oil field on fire and get away from the trio that is trying to capture her and take her back to her homeworld and all that kind of stuff. But where did she get the lighter from? Why does Yaira have a lighter? And Nooktip just says, well, the light stuff. She doesn't have fire powers. I don't have fire powers either. I don't carry around a lighter. How many non-smokers do you know who carry a lighter? I mean, if Yaira had been shown to, smoke a pipe or even a cigarette earlier in the book, I would be like, okay, yeah, she has a lighter on her. But without that, why would you ever have one? Now, I actually went onto social media because I was curious to know whether this was just a cultural thing or something. And I asked about 5,000 people on social media, do you carry a lighter on your person wherever you go, even though you don't smoke? And I did get one hit. She's a 72-year-old who has carried a lighter on her person for 60 plus years, just in case she needed one. And she's never used it. Okay. She's actually been carrying a lighter around for no good reason since she was 12 years old. This screams mental health issues. I'm sorry, it just does. But the point being, even begging the extreme and positing that Yaira has carried a lighter around on her person for decades, just in case she would have to blow up some of her own race over an oil field, why don't you tell us that? I mean, isn't that funny enough to warrant inclusion in her dialogue? Here is how I would have written that scene. Do you know I've carried this for years, waiting for a moment like this? And whenever I was asked why a non-smoker carried one, I'd say, it's for my relatives. I cracked me up. Anyway, my favorite answer. So now we've gone through all of Nooktip's answers, and I have to pick out my favorite from the bunch. And my favorite answer, bar none, is to this question. Why does Yaira look away from her pursuers? Shame, perhaps? Or is she trying to keep an eye on Stefania? And Nooktip responded, consider the silver-haired lady's dialogue. It isn't shame. Silver-haired lady's dialogue. She's got a name, you know. It's Yanessa. I actually mentioned it during the video. Why is it that Nooktip doesn't know this name? Because I realized Nooktip is going along with my video and writing out questions, and at this point, Nooktip says, consider the silver-haired lady's dialogue. And I realized that at this point in the book, Yanessa's name had not been given, so obviously I would not have shared anything about Yanessa's name at that point. But that meant Nooktip didn't know it either. Nooktip doesn't know Yanessa's name, which means Nooktip hasn't read the book. Oh my god. Are you telling me that you spent all this time writing answers to my questions for a book you haven't even read yourself? You know, I don't know about you, but if somebody comments on, a movie I haven't seen, I don't try to make comments about that movie. I don't go out of my way to argue with people about their estimation of that movie because unless you see it, you have no idea what it's about. You have no idea what the level of quality is until you experience it for yourself. And what you're telling me with your ignorance is that you have not even read the book, but you are willing to argue about it with people because you don't like your pet artists or creatives or whoever it is that you're trying to defend from being attacked. For, rightfully attacked for putting out a product of low quality. You just want to protect and defend your pet creators. You're pathetic. You're pathetic. You're uninformed. You're ignorant. And you're not even competent in the ways that you ask the questions. Why are you bothering the adults, child? Why are you trying to dip your toe into this pool when you can't even fork up the money to pay for a copy of the book and read it yourself? No, even worse than that. You can't even find a bootleg copy, and they're out there. It is not hard to find a bootleg copy of Yaira #1 online. You know why I don't use a bootleg copy for my scans and such? Because I want Eric to know that I'm paying for this crap. I'm a paying customer. That gives me a voice. Who are you? You're nobody to him. Do you understand that? You're nobody to Eric July. Because you won't pay to read his stuff. Oh, but you'll pay in time and energy and wasting other people's time to defend him. For what reason, I know not what. Because he doesn't know you. And he doesn't care about you. He only cares about his paying customers. Which you're not. Because you obviously haven't read Yaira #1. But you're defending it. Whatever. Anyway, the only reason, and please understand, the only reason that I have wasted all this time on you is because by making this into a video that other people can learn from, I have turned what could have been a waste of time into something educational for other people. So I have to thank you for at least providing me with the fodder for this video. I hope it's been informative to a bunch of people out there. But you need to realize your own problems. One of which being you're obsessed with defending people who don't know you, who don't care about you, and whose work you haven't even consumed so that you could be any sort of authority on it. You've got better things to do with your time. Go learn a trade. Be a welder. We need welders in America. We don't need people, defending books they haven't even read. Okay. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. This has been Worthless Answers to My Whys, and oh boy, were they worthless. I appreciate your time. I hope this was educational, and I hope you will subscribe, and so that you can get notified of future videos. I do think I will produce one more Rippaverse video in the near future, talking about the different interpretations of Alpha Core that we see in ISOM #2 and Yaira #1. I think those are kind of a consistent interpretation there, but not at all consistent is Chuck Dixon's interpretation in Alpha Core #1, ironically, which means his would be the authoritative interpretation, you would think. But instead, we get two entirely different Alpha Cores of the same name in the Rippaverse. It's like we don't have a multiverse. We don't need a multiverse. We just have bad writing. That's all it takes to have a multiverse is bad writing you can't reconcile, and then you need a multiverse. So yeah, it's kind of funny looking at Alpha Core in the different comics and figuring out that, hey, These creators have no idea who these characters are. That's just fascinating. All right, thanks again for watching. I'm Mike Bartica. Please do subscribe so that you will get notified of future videos, and I will talk to you later.